People who have gone to the emergency room due to an intimate accident. What was your injury and story? Story 1. Doug was my fourth-year college roommate. Along with a couple of other people, he was a strange fellow. I became accustomed to broken beer bottles in the floor, bizarre corno in the VCR, body fluids in places you wouldn't expect it, and frequent visits by the cops and to the emergency room. One night, Doug is being visited by his girlfriend from out of town. They spend most of their time tucked away in Doug's bedroom, doing God knows what. Doug sneaks out and doesn't return for several hours. When he comes back, he has an emergency room bracelet on. After some grilling, he gives up the story. He and his girlfriend are looking for something that might work as a makeshift dong ring. Nothing around except a large padlock. So, she snaps the padlock around his rooster and bean sack. When it becomes clear that it isn't going to work like they thought it would, they go looking for the key. Nowhere to be found. Most of us would have thought about the location of the key before putting it around ourselves. So, Doug heads off to the emergency room to get it removed, afraid of losing his giblets to restriction of blood flow. The procedure takes several hours because the doctor has to parade in every other doctor, nurse, intern, and possibly janitor to check out the moron with the padlock stuck around his nuts. Also, they have to take frequent breaks during the sawing off due to the heat that keeps accumulating from the friction and burning his privates. Before we continue, do us a quick favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. Was doing the deed. No thrills, nothing fancy. Afterwards, we're sitting on the couch and I feel crampy, so I go into the bathroom and I sit. That's when I have the most painful cramp of all time. My boyfriend comes in to see me full-blown hysterical tears, calls my mom, who's an ER nurse, whose motto as a child was no bones sticking out or gushing blood, means you're fine. She drives down immediately and takes me to the ER. That's when I panic, because if this cold-hearted ER nurse thinks I need to go pronto, it's serious. When we get there, it's slow enough that I pretty much immediately see a doctor who just happens to be my mom's favorite coworker. Awesome. I then try to explain why it hurts and how it happened when my mom blurts out she was banging. The doctor didn't flinch much, but I sure did. I couldn't stand being in that situation. Thankfully, the embarrassment didn't last long because they gave me amazing painkillers. Long story short, I was getting intimate with my boyfriend. Had an ovarian cyst burst. Horrifyingly painful, went to be ER doctor, and my mom were buddies. Good times. Story 3. Not so much in injuries, but the treatment and aftermath did hurt a lot. Darn rubber came off inside me and we didn't notice until after we were done. Both of us tried to look or feel for it and couldn't find any trace. I ended up in the ER and the doctor tried removing it with tongs, but it was apparently wedged right up in my cervix and the tongs couldn't reach. So this doctor, with hands like Mr. Burns had to, and get in there with his hands to yank it out. It hurt so much, and I was completely mortified as my partner was sat next to me watching, and was horrified. I now have a phobia of that happening again, and it makes intimate time with rubber really awkward for me. Story 4. This isn't my story, but my friend's. She had just broken up with her longtime boyfriend and moved out, etc. Well, she gets a phone call from him. And all he told her was, "I'm at the hospital, can you come pick me up?" So she goes to pick him up. After he practically begs her to, and he gets in the car holding a box. Naturally, she asks what it is. And he really doesn't want to tell her. Long story short, he got a vibrating toy stuck where you don't want to be stuck. He went to the hospital, they did tests and told him they could get it out, and they did. But my favorite part, they made him wait till the batteries died. They literally told him that they couldn't remove it until the batteries died, so they sent him back out to wait in the waiting room until that happened. Then they removed, boxed, and sent him on his way. Story 5. I had to drive a friend to the ER after he broke his dong during a house party. I was already the scheduled designated driver for my friends, and apparently one of them snuck off with this girl. They were doing the good old reverse cowgirl like any other young bucks would, and she ended up zigging where she should have zagged and kind of did a 90-degree body torque. To his explanation, it sorts of just popped and he threw her off him and screamed his lung out. He tossed on some shorts commando style and told me to drive him to the hospital like now. Drop what I'm doing. Get in the car, you're the only one sober. Let's go. let's go. Oh, and the girl came along. Her name was Amanda, and she was pretty chill. So it was me driving two barely clothed 20-year-olds in my car to the local hospital 20 minutes away with my dude holding his dong in the back seat, and Amanda just consoling him, rubbing his back, making sure he's okay, telling him, it's going to be all right, you're going to be fine, like he hadn't just fractured his little guy. So, we make it to the ER and he just hobbles in and says he broke his joystick, please fix it. And they took him in, and I was just alone with this girl I had met that night just waiting for the prognosis. And around an hour later they tell us that he's having emergency surgery because he suffered a severe fracture and tore his internal muscles as well. And basically told us to go home, call someone to pick him up that night. Dude was under the knife and discharged the next day, joystick intact and pried only somewhat. Oh, and I also had to call his parents to let them know that their son was having emergency surgery for his ding-dong of destiny, and to pick him up in the morning. There could not be a fun call at 12 at night, depending on the perspective. They ended up dating for a while after that too. Story 6. This did not happen to me, thank God, but a friend who works as a nurse at a hospital saw them and heard the whole story. I cannot verify whether it is true or not, but God do I pray it is. A local young couple decided that they wanted to get intimate, but they were afraid of getting pregnant, so they decided to use the back door. The boy decided ahead of time to take multiple pills in order to impress her on their first go at it. She invites him over to her house and they start doing the deed while her parents are also at home. Unbeknownst to the girl, the boy's dong has a pretty powerful left hook. Not a casual amount either. Like a holy smokes, is that normal amount? He didn't realize it was a problem, because he hadn't done it before. So he's doing the dirty work from behind when he realizes that he's hooked her back door like a fish. He's latched her with and can't escape the pills he took, ensured that he would be strong for the next few hours. She's in pain and she can't escape, so she calls her parents for help. Her father enters to see the catastrophe that's taking place in his daughter's room and ultimately ends up taking them to a hospital. Imagine them shuffling their way to the car in the Scooby-Doo style position with her parents' help. They arrive at the hospital and are carted to a room by my nurse friend. They are seen by a couple nurses and then a doctor who can't do anything to help other than wait for the effects of the pill to wear off. In the meantime, word spread throughout the hospital of what happened. I'd imagine the poor kid had to change schools after it happened. Story 7. I had really terrible cramps a few times after being intimate, enough that I had to take pain pills just to sleep. The pain was gone in the next morning both times, and weirdly it didn't happen every time we got intimate. I went to the gyno and even had an ultrasound done, but no one could see anything. Fast forward a few months later, one night my boyfriend and I got kind of drunk while watching Baywatch and decided to keep a good night going with some tipsy, intimate time. The cramping started midway through and didn't let up. Within minutes I was crouched bare on the toilet. No idea why I thought it would help, and couldn't move. My boyfriend called an Uber in lieu of an ambulance. I managed to get myself dressed, despite puking every few seconds into a plastic mixing bowl. The poor driver didn't want to take me, since he probably thought I was drunk, and sat there arguing with my boyfriend that I needed an ambulance. I blurted out, "Get me to a hospital now," and he slammed on the gas. That argumentative angel got me there in less than 5 minutes. It turns out an ovarian cyst had burst and torn my uterine wall, so I was bleeding internally. I had to have laparoscopic surgery to remove and cauterize the cyst. Those little devils are no joke. My only regret is never learning what size fruit or ball I could compare it to. I'm also eternally grateful to my boyfriend to being too tired for tent intimate time the week before, or I would have been bleeding internally at the far end of the Grand Canyon. Story 8. Few years ago, with an ex-boyfriend of mine, we were fooling around, and he tried to pin my arms over my head on the bed, and ended up banging my wrist really hard on the headboard. It immediately started to bruise, and I was scared it was broken. We ended up in the ER, and I was asked all kinds of questions, like did I feel comfortable going home with him? Did he hurt me? Did he hurt my wrist? I wasn't expecting that at all. They separated us at one point to ask me more questions about how I got hurt, which was super embarrassing to try and explain. I'm pretty sure he was scared to be too rough with me after that, and I don't blame him. Nothing was broken, just our egos. Story 9. I've told this story a few times. An intimate injury literally ended up saving my life. My best friend at the time, and I had a few drinks and tensions, had been there between us for a long time. She invited me back to her room and tackled me onto her bed, where I hit my head hard off the bedpost. The next morning, concussion symptoms started hitting me very heavily, so I went to the ER. On my CT scan, they told me everything looks normal except for your old brain trauma. I have never had brain trauma. About a month later, it is diagnosed as a brain tumor that I was not showing symptoms for yet. Had surgery a few weeks later to have it removed, and at that point found out it was non-cancerous. So basically, she effed my brains out. Story 10. So, I get a text from a guy I work with at 1 a.m. that says, "Hey, I won't be able to make it in tomorrow." Naturally, I ask why. He replies, "I sit in the hospital. It's really embarrassing." I press for more details. What happened? Are you okay? Turns out, he was having some passionate, intimate time with his girlfriend. Things got a little too enthusiastic, and when he tried to re-enter the cave, he missed and hit the space between her thigh and her cooter. The impact bent his dong in half. At first, I didn't believe him, but after doing a bit of research, I found out it's a real thing. He ended up needing emergency surgery and was out of work for 2 weeks. So, yeah, long story short, my coworker broke his dong. Story 11. I was recently lying in bed with my dog kind of spooning her, while my husband was standing next to the bed. He called her name, and she whipped her head around, smacking me right on the bone next to my eye with her concrete skull. I immediately started screaming. It felt so hot that I was convinced it was bleeding. My husband looked at it and saw a bruise already starting to form. I couldn't stop crying and yelling, so he insisted on taking me to the ER. He was worried I might have cracked my orbital bone, something he'd seen happen to a basketball player recently. In the end, I was fine. The pain eased up during the 3-hour wait at the ER. When the nurse checked me in, she asked the standard abuse screening questions, which I later realized she was asking every patient. Still, when I had to explain how I got hurt, I was nervous. People might think I was making up a ridiculous cover story. Thankfully, no one seemed judgmental, and the surgeon who eventually saw me even joked about it with me and my husband. Story 12. This didn't happen to me, but to my wife. She was working the front desk on a med-surg floor, and one night, when I came by to bring her dinner, I saw everyone crowded around the desk, laughing and passing around a cell phone. I'll preface this by saying, yes, they all knew it was a huge HIPAA violation, but the situation was so wild. They just couldn't keep quiet about it. Apparently, a guy had driven a few hundred miles from a neighboring state, clearly trying to put some distance between his home and whatever he'd done. After a bit of prodding, one of the nurses got him to admit that he had gotten real messed up on white powder and that something really messed up happened. He was complaining of severe lower abdominal pain and refused to sit down. Turns out, in his drugged-up state, the guy thought it would be a brilliant idea to shove a liter-sized mason jar up his back door, and surprise, surprise, it got stuck. One of the nurses somehow managed to snap a picture of the X-ray and passed it around. Sure enough, there it was, clear as day on the screen. The guy had to go in for emergency surgery and ended up needing a colostomy bag for an undetermined amount of time. I can't imagine how he explained that to whoever he was trying to hide it from, if he explained it at all. Story 13. I was 19. My girlfriend and I were getting experimental in the dark and decided to try a 69 for the first time. She was on top. Everything was going great until she came. Then things were very much not great. She involuntarily bit down right in the middle of my member. It only lasted a moment, but the damage was done. In the dark, she thought I had finished, so she kept going. As she climaxed, her body relaxed, especially her legs, which pinned me down. I couldn't move. She mistook my squirming for enjoyment. After about 5 seconds of trying to buckaroo her off me, I managed to throw her to the side. The only way I can describe the pain is like a paper cut on your little guy. Another way to describe it? Your dong has a major artery. That means blood pumps away from the heart. That also means it squirts. A lot. We switched on the light, and it was everywhere. The scene was horrifying. My little guy, still semi-woken, was spurting blood like a horror movie fountain. Her face looked like Hannibal Lecter's attractive daughter. The sheets were soaked. Blood was splattered in little arcs across the room. I estimate I lost about a pint in the 30 seconds between the bite and when I passed out. Did I mention we were at her parents' civ house? I woke up in the ambulance. They assured me I'd be okay. I was strapped up with a tourniquet, and a paramedic was pressing down on my now unconscious and very injured dong. It didn't hurt anymore, but it throbbed with a terrifying rhythm. At the hospital, I received a transfusion. They used some kind of liquid nitrogen cauterization thing to stop the bleeding. Then they wrapped me up with what I can only describe as a medical-grade willy warmer. Her parents and I made an unspoken pact that night. We will never speak of this again. Now, I have PTSD. Every single blowy takes me back to that moment. That pain. Story 14. Not me, but this literally happened to my roommate hours ago. She called me and told me I needed to drive her to the hospital because of an emergency, which happened during getting intimate with this guy she's seeing. Apparently, they were trying out a rough role play. She's pretty shy and seemingly conservative, and sounded really worried about it. And he's pretty weird, and according to her, overly attached and emotional. I thought maybe it wasn't consensual, one by the tone of her voice, and two recent mentions that she had to end things with him. She also said he was still around her. I silently concluded that he got carried away and went too far with her out of emotions. But no. Turns out they got super high and tried to make things hot and heavy. He tried to grab her neck and basically karate chopped her like a total goober, and she, being high, thought her esophagus was bleeding because she couldn't swallow. I assured her she didn't need to go to the hospital, but I ended up taking her anyway. She had to tell the hospital in CA she got high and tried to get intimate and her neck got judo choked. They took an x-ray of her neck, and literally no damage whatsoever. When I picked her back up, she was super embarrassed and begged me not to tell anyone. So now I decided to tell Reddit. Story 15. We ended up in a full-blown pillow fight unclothed after drinking wine on our first date. At one point she tackled me from standing upright and landed with her full weight and mine on my shoulder, instantly dislocating it. I was jumping around like a maniac, screaming something to the extent of my arm shouldn't be pointing that way while having a full raging stiffy. She found this absolutely hilarious. I then proceeded to try and relocate my arm Minas Rambo style, where I just tried whacking it into her dresser. Pro tip, don't do that. Then we went to the emergency room, where I got a mix of morphine and something else, which made me instantly sloppy, but pleasantly high, while a nurse and a doctor proceeded to pull my arm back into place. We then went home, proceeded to continue our unfinished romances, and realized then that it was 6 in the morning, and I had to be back on site. She then drove me 75 kilometers in my company car to my hotel, as I was high on morphine and in no state to drive, and proceeded to sleep there while I was working. I most definitely took her out for dinner. Story 16. I'm an ER nurse. Late one night, a guy comes back from triage, shirtless, with a bright red pool of blood soaking through his khaki shorts right over his midsection. The nurse escorting him is walking fast and looks visibly flustered, and the patient is absolutely beside himself. I'm thinking, amputation? Traumatic accident? Something serious. The guy's so loud and upset that he also grabs the attention of one of our ER doctors. The doctor and I both follow him into his assigned room. We get him on the bed, fast. I start helping him undress while the doctor works on calming him down and trying to figure out what happened so we can treat him properly. After a few moments, the patient finally collects himself enough to explain. He says that he and a woman were starting to fool around, dry banging, as he put it, while both were unclothed. She was on top, and according to him, she was really getting into it. Then all of a sudden, I hear a ripping sound. I look down, and my dong is bleeding. I panicked, threw my pants on, and came straight here. What had happened was that, during their particularly aggressive dry banging session, the frenulum on the underside of his foreskin tore, essentially giving him a partial circumcision. He then calmly requested a full circumcision, saying, "Because I never want this to happen again." Story 17. I had a hysterectomy in February this year, and was told no intimate contact for 6 weeks. I kicked my then-boyfriend out of my apartment in March. In April, right after my 6-week follow-up where I got cleared for physical intimacy again, I got lonely, but did not want a relationship, so I hit up an old pal of mine for a one-night casual intimacy because I was in the mood for a terrible decision. Things were going well, until he noticed I was bleeding, and then it started to hurt. Freaking bad. I went home and laid on my heating pad, trying to rest, and called the doctor's office as soon as they opened the next morning. They scheduled me an appointment for a few hours later, so I assumed no big deal and tried to push through the pain while getting dressed. Now, I just had a sweaty, nasty one-night stand less than 8 hours prior, plus I'd started leaking this weird clear fluid during the night. Genuinely thought I'd pissed the bed until I stood up and felt it keep gushing. So, naturally, being the prim and proper woman I am, decided to shower first. Nope, in too much pain to stand for a shower? Screw it, I thought. I'll just take a bath. Despite being clean, I was in so much pain I couldn't get out of the bathtub. Had to call a friend of mine with a spare key to come get me out and dressed and drive me to the doctor. So, I get to the doctor, finally, and he's like, "Yup, we're gonna go ahead and wheel you down to the operating room now." Turns out that weird clear fluid I kept leaking was abdominal fluid. My one-night stand hung like a goddamn bull had penetrated through the hysterectomy stitches, tearing my insides and leaving a gaping wound from my hoo-ha into my abdomen. And by bathing instead of showering, I essentially filled my abdomen with bath water. By the time I got to the OR, I had a 103 fever and I think, it gets kind of blurry here, they said I was turning septic. I had about 5 minutes to call my mom to let her know I was about to have surgery and demanded from the entire staff that my mother could not know it was caused by bad romantic decisions. I woke up a few hours later, feeling great. Morphine is amazing and wanted to go home. However, I got myself a nice little hospital stay for 5 days while they kept me on IV antibiotics because my dumb self had to take a bath before going to the doctor and letting him see the filthy girl I really am. Mom thinks that I just tore a few stitches from going too hard at the gym after the hysterectomy, and I intend to keep it that way. Last week, I had my final follow-up appointment for my V-area cuff surgery, and am now cleared to have intimate time again. But I'm not sure if I'm ever going to, because that was scary as hell. Story 18. So, I had been seeing my girlfriend for about a month or so. The intimate session was great, and I was already falling really hard for her. I'm definitely into fist love, and she has hands that just do it for me. Anyways, as those who are familiar with fist and hand love will know, a sense of intimacy and trust is really key, and this night I felt very safe and cared for and loved and was ready to take the plunge. My girlfriend, unfortunately, had no previous experience with this, but I tried to explain and talk and guide her through it. She has sizable hands, and that was a real turn-on for me. I couldn't wait. So cut to us in position, everything is going well, and I feel just how big her hands actually are as she slips in down to her wrist. Too late. At this point, I inform her that she's too big for me and to stop and slowly pull out. Being entirely new to this though, my girlfriend unthinkingly maintained her clenched fist and panic yanked with full force. The shock was instantaneous, and then the blood flowed. I kept my calm though, got dressed, jammed a towel in my pants, and my now freaked-out girlfriend drove me to the hospital. So into the ER we go. My girlfriend was silently freaking out. I'm bleeding too from my peach pie, and I'm taken away to a room that my girlfriend isn't allowed into. ER doc tried to stop the bleeding. No amount of packing and pressure and meds seemed to be helping. Bowls and bowls of blood and gauze left that room, all with my poor, sweet, innocent girlfriend sitting and watching the activity, convinced that she has probably broken me for good. So after what seemed like ages, I was booked for theater to get fixed up, and that's bad news. See, I was still on my parents' medical aid, and they were going to find out shortly that I was in hospital and would want to know what happened. My girlfriend is finally allowed in to see me, and she feels anxious and worried. I tell her that I have to be operated on, but it gets worse. I've never been under before and may have a bad reaction due to family history. I give her the phone numbers of my parents in case things go south. She hadn't even spoken a word to them before. I've never seen a person more terrified before. Fortunately though, surgery went well. I told my wonderful parents the next day what had happened, and because the hospital had a former colleague running the ward, I was given extra special care, and they even let my now deeply scarred girlfriend nap in my hospital bed with me outside of visiting hours. My girlfriend and I are even more madly in love for the experience, and everybody thinks that our trauma is hilarious. Turns out, my girlfriend had cut right through and along a blood vessel with a nail, thus leading to the Tarantino-like scene. All in all, 3/10 would not recommend. Story 19. Was at a club, and for the first time ever, a girl and stranger wanted to dance with me. She was very aggressive on the floor, and being as drunk as I was, I let her lead. She was bumping and grinding so hard for what seemed like a good hour, on and off, not continuously. I go home and sleep none for the worst. The next morning I wake up, go to the bathroom, and see blood on the base of my dong. Since I am no good with blood at all, and considering where the blood was coming from, I just freaked out. The worst part of it all was that no one in my family was home, and it was the one time I had the house to myself. So I had to ask a neighbor, who saw me look pale as a ghost in my car, to drive me to the ER. Long story short, nothing was physically wrong with my dong, like it was broken or anything. It's just that the dancing this girl did was so rough and aggressive, it just chafed the base incredibly hard. So the nurses gave me some ointment to fix the mess, and I was driven home. I don't think I was ever more embarrassed in my life, and vowed to never go clubbing again. Until about 2 years later, where my friend and I went to the same club, and she wound up doing the exact same thing to me. So, the lesson is that I can never dance at a club. Story 20. One morning, I had an intimate time with my partner while I was 24 weeks pregnant. Afterwards, I started experiencing very painful cramps every few minutes. Concerned, I called my dad, who works IT at a hospital, and he told me to get my ass to the ER. He said he'd start the paperwork on his end so I could be seen ASAP. Sure enough, I had gone into early labor. They gave me medication to stop it and put me on bed rest. A few days later, I had an OB/GYN appointment. At the end of it, I had to remind my doctor that the ER staff had requested I get an ultrasound. So I went in for the ultrasound, and the tech turns to me and says, "You're seeing a doctor right after this, correct?" I told her no, I'd already had my appointment. She replies, "Okay, stay here a minute," and walks out of the room. When she returns, she tells me to go straight to the OB ward at the connected hospital. The doctors are already waiting for you. I was in early labor again, and already dilated. Our town's fairly small, and we don't have a NICU. If I gave birth there, things could go south fast. So, I had to be airlifted across the state to a hospital that did have a NICU. Not a fan of flying? Try doing it with a catheter in during turbulence, while your unborn child keeps kicking at the catheter, and the meds they gave you turn your hands weird shades of yellow and blue. The doctors at the new hospital were able to stop labor again, but I had to stay for a full week before I was cleared to go home. I was then put on strict bed rest for the next 2 months. When I first arrived at the hospital, they told me all sorts of encouraging things, like, if you give birth now, your baby has a 33% chance of brain damage. But if we can keep her in for just 1 more week, it'll drop to 25%. Fun times. Story 21. My wife and I had just found out we were pregnant. She was about 5-6 weeks along. We were terrified, but also incredibly excited. At the same time, we were dealing with a bunch of family issues and homeowner stress. Overall, it was a pretty intense period in our lives. So, one Saturday afternoon, we decided to knock out all our chores before noon, turn off our phones, and just have a chill day to decompress. Right as we finished up, she jokingly said, "Do you want to try for twins?" with a wry smile and a wink. So, we went upstairs and had some amazing, intimate time. Nothing wild or unusual, but it was one of those times where all the stress just melted away. It was definitely up there in our top 10. Afterwards, I went out back to relax in the hammock and have a beer. She said she was going to take a quick shower and then join me, minus the beer, of course. About 10 minutes later, she came down, hair still wet and a terrified look on her face, and said, "I think we need to go to the hospital." She was bleeding from the hoo-ha. We went straight to the ER. The staff were great and did their best to fast-track us, but even so, there were long stretches of sitting, waiting, holding each other, and not knowing. I couldn't stop thinking about how I'd live with myself, how I'd ever be able to get intimate again if I had just accidentally aborted my child with my own dong. Thankfully, the doctors came back with good news. Everything looked great. We got to see our baby's little heart beating for the first time on the ultrasound. They told us the bleeding was likely just residual tissue that would have normally come out with her period. The banging just got it all moving at once. Today we have a very healthy, happy 1-year-old boy. Story 22. A few months ago, a long-distance friend with whom I enjoy a very fantasy-fulfilling relationship agreed to take things to the next level with me and actually enter an official dom-sub relationship. As part of this, I'd now fly out to see him a few times a year to spend a week together engaging in play and just hanging out as friends. He lives about halfway across the country from me, but we both thought it more than worthwhile. So I'm on one such trip when we were engaging in some switchy play where he was topping for me in a more embarrassing wishes of mine. Wearing a diaper, I'd basically spent the whole day in one gone to dinner, did some play, had a lovely time of it. Eventually though, it got late and he had work on the morning, so he went off to bed while I went to spend some time on the computer. Suddenly my bowels started feeling very unhappy. It felt like I had to take a dump, but it was going to be one of those times that was not going to be fun, where you can feel your intestines cringing as things moved through them. I decided to take the diaper off at this point, because it was definitely no longer fun once I was feeling this pain. But then it got worse, and worse, and worse. I tried sitting on the toilet, hoping against all hope that something would happen, but nothing to it. After a while of this, with the pain continually worsening as time passed, I ended up lying on the floor, completely unable to move from the pain. I started yelling for my friend to wake up, as I was scared. It took a bit, and I think I woke some neighbors, as he's a very heavy sleeper, but the panic in his eyes when he saw me sprawled out on the floor screaming in pain. Yeah. We eventually decide to call an ambulance, because I'm in too much pain to handle the 3 flights of stairs to the ground floor. This was no easy decision. It's scary enough to go to the ER when you're out of state. But on top of that, I'm a pre-op transgender woman. This was a rural enough area that I would likely be a lot of people's first transgender patient. And by this point, I had realized the pain wasn't just in my abdomen, it was in my testicles. Oh, and when the paramedics arrived, it was to a room littered with intimate toys and a guy who clearly is not the husband. Yeah, that looked great. Eventually they load me up into the ambulance, with every bump of the stairs and road eliciting cries of pain from me, and get me to the hospital. I'd had this pain before from diaper play, though never to this extent, which I did my best to relate to the doctor while omitting the fantasy aspect. I simply said that I'd been wearing tight undergarments. The doctor said she'd have to do a physical examination, which would include gently manipulating them and squeezing. At the first touch of my privates, I started screaming my lungs out. It was like someone had taken a vice grips to my sack after they'd just gone a few rounds with Mike Tyson. As if that wasn't enough, they also needed an ultrasound of them. It was a solid 15 of sitting on a bed of nails, as the technician did her absolute best to be as gentle as possible, but there were still moments of screaming agony. Several hours later, they had their incorrect diagnosis: swelling of the epididymis, caused by an STD, actually caused by diaper. They gave me some antibiotic and 800 milligrams of ibuprofen and sent me on my way. I couldn't walk. Being wheeled anywhere was pure torture. My friend had ridden in the ambulance, so we had to take a cab home, which took 90 minutes to arrive. Every pothole was like shooting knives through my sack. 3 flights of stairs to get back to the apartment. I spent the night only getting sleep in 15-minute shifts, because laying in one position too long relieved the sack pain, but exacerbated the abdominal pain. The rest of the week we had planned had to be restructured to be easier on me, but we still had an amazing time together. Lesson of the story: do not ever ride in the ambulance to accompany a friend, and be careful how tightly you wear a diaper on your nutsack. Story 23. I work as an operating theater nurse, and over the years, I've helped remove a wide variety of objects, mostly from the back doors of male patients. Among the highlights, fake dongs, jars of Vaseline, beads, and deodorant cans. And that's just the start. We've also retrieved twigs and bracelets from male urethras. One particularly memorable case involved a man who came in with a fake dong lodged far up his rectum courtesy of his wife, who apparently got a little too enthusiastic. The first thing the surgeon asked was whether he had engaged in anal activity before. He said yes, which, in this context, was actually a good thing. It meant his sphincter muscles were likely more relaxed, making removal easier. If he hadn't, the muscle tension would have significantly increased the chance that we'd need to perform a laparotomy to get it out. So we prepped him. General anesthesia, muscle relaxants, legs up in stirrups, a position eerily similar to childbirth. The moment everything was in place, it launched out. It shot across the room, hit the floor, and turned itself on. What followed was the most awkward, slow-motion 5 seconds I've experienced in my entire career. A bright pink vibrating dildo skittering across the sterile theater floor, leaving behind a brownish trail as it went. Unfortunately, I was the one who had to catch it and turn it off. The team then spent the next 5 minutes debating whether we should dispose of it or return it to the patient, since technically it was his personal property. In the end, we sealed it in a human waste bag and asked him post-op if he wanted it back. He did not. Story 24. Was gonna pound town on a girlfriend many years ago. Position: I had my feet on the floor. She was lying on her back on the bed. We did it like this because she liked to spray her, and this was a way to mitigate having a super soggy mattress, especially because this was my side of the bed. Anyhow, after a few minutes of going to pound town, she starts squirming because she's about to open her floodgates. Nothing new for us, and it's happened many times. So I know to slow down just a bit because she can start bucking and squirming hard at times. This time, I've had a few beers, and I'm really getting into it, and we hear an audible pop. I scream and white-knuckle grab the sheet, because the pain is unbearable. I go blind to the pain and everything is going white. She's screaming too. I collapse next to her in the bed to catch my breath and wait for the pain to subside. It never really does, and I wait for my stiffy to go down. 10 minutes later, I go to the bathroom to pee, and I feel a little burning sensation in my pipes during the emptying of my bladder. I go to lay back down. I get up 20 minutes later because I have the sensation to pee again. I pee for 4 seconds and then notice a few drops of blood dripping out at the end. I grab some ice and place it on my dong. I also pop 1,600 milligrams of Motrin, just in panic mode and reacting the way I would normally do for a sports injury. I wake up in the course of the night 8 times to pee, and always have a few drops of blood at the end of my 5-second pee sessions. The next morning, I drive to the hospital. At the hospital, I go to the ER and have to fill out the reason for visit before they get my vitals. I put down broken dong ? Because I don't know what to call it. I place my sheet in the box, and before I can even seat myself in the half-filled waiting room, my name gets called. Nurse taking my vitals asks about my visit until after he gets all of my vitals. I tell him what happened, and then he lets me head back to the waiting area. Just as I sit down, my name is called again, and they get a wheelchair for me. I'm told to change into a gown, and a urologist will be with me shortly. Urologist asks what happened. I tell him. He tells me to wait patiently as he's going to get some items ready. I have to have a catheter pushed inside of me through my urethra. This will allow them to see if there are any breaks in my urethra. About 6 other people come in to look at my broke dong, because how often does this happen? Back on the wheelchair, they roll me back to the radiology area and fast-track me to the fluoroscope. It's like an X-ray, but a live image. Doc makes me hop up on the cold stainless table. Little guy shrivels up because it is cold in the room and the table is freezing. He has to kind of pull it and stick this catheter up there, and it freaking hurts. White blindness pain again. He hooks up an IV bag to the catheter and tells me there is a dye in there that will show up on the fluoroscope, and I have to manually pump it in as he hides behind the lidded glass. Imagine cold water filling up your bladder in reverse. It feels strange. After slowly pumping water for a few seconds, catheter pops loose and I end up spraying saline all over the floor from my bladder. I can't stop it at all. Doc comes back in to place the catheter in there one more time because he didn't get a good enough look. I was worried that I was going to pass out, but it surprisingly didn't hurt that much the second time. Doctor concludes there may have been a slight shear in the urethra but shouldn't warrant emergency surgery, gives me some antibiotics and prescribes no banging for 2 weeks. I go to Pound Town 4 hours after I got back from the visit. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.